But good stuff. The title of today's session is really how to solve business constraints using custom software and automation. Our initial, slightly flashier title was how to unlock million-dollar opportunities using custom software, which we thought was a little bit flashy, but I think I trust today you'll see actually is a justifiable title as we go through examples and case studies. Yeah, I'm looking forward to kind of getting into the content of today, because it's kind of what we do every day with our clients, so it's important to us. I think upfront, when people think about unlocking growth, there tends to be a thinking of how do I get more leads? It's a marketing, it's a sale, it's a new market or product kind of expansion. But another way to look at this is really through business constraints. It's solving bottlenecks. It's solving these constraints that are actually limiting growth to begin with. And that is exactly what we're going to be focusing on today. Cool. So the aim of the workshop is to help you identify new growth opportunities and existing bottlenecks. It's to show you what successfully then addressing these with technology, with software, with automation should actually look like. And at the end of the day, it's to be as helpful as possible. So no questions are off limits. We're here to be as specific, as practical as possible. The Q&A is open. So throughout, you're welcome to put your questions in and we'll answer to the best of our ability. We'll answer those all at the end. And I will also share our contact information. So you're welcome then to pop us a DM on LinkedIn, pop us an email, and we're happy to be as helpful as we can. And today's really just about sharing our experiences, insights we think you'd find helpful to kind of avoid common pitfalls and failures we see, and all stuff that we validate ourselves over the years that we've been doing this respectively. So yeah, we've spoken with probably 300 plus businesses over the last 10 years about this type of thing, about bottlenecks and building custom software solutions that are going to work in their business. And these are the reasons we've commonly seen people failed when they've come to us after having that first attempt. Upfront, it's that they've struggled to identify and kind of correctly understand and evaluate the bottleneck and constraint. But most people tend to somewhat get that right. It's that pain, it's the thing causing immense amount of stress. So they've got a general idea, and it tends to be with them trying to solve it, where the real problems and wastage of time and money comes in. And that is our second, third, and fourth step. So they poorly define that solution requirement. They follow a bad software development process, or lastly, they actually choose the wrong technology stack. And ironically, that new incorrect stack ends up becoming a new form of bottleneck altogether. So we're going to run through these at quite a high level, but we'll get quite specific a little bit later on. Up front, an introduction is in order. My name is Robbie. I am one of the partners and CEO at SwiftCom. In that photo, you can see my better looking and arguably more intelligent business partners. Skulk in the middle, looking very distinguished in the Rick and Morty t-shirt, and Chris on the far right, who you saw as well. And between us, we're looking at about 35 plus years of building software across insurance, fintech, e-commerce, Web3. We've done some cool stuff in mining, sports, entertainment, and really just a lot across the board in exactly this type of thing of solving constraints and unlocking growth by using technology. And we as a team are split across Cape Town and Pretoria, obviously all in South Africa. So today we're looking to really discuss how custom software links to bottlenecks. And for us, that usually means building some form of web application, process automation, interactive dashboards, or even some form of integration with hardware. So all of that stuff is kind of in the wheelhouse of what we're looking to discuss today. Cool. A quick flow. We're going to start with a very quick run through of why we should be discussing this. We're then going to go into how to actually practically identify them, how to unlock them, and then lastly, a solution of kind of what we'd like to suggest to you guys post this call is probably an easy, practical first step if you've got something specific in mind. Cool. So why should you even care about solving bottlenecks and building custom software? I think the obvious one is business impact, arguably the significant reason of why we do any of this. And we really need to begin here by understanding the business value, but often it's not, I would argue, sufficiently viewed through aspects of what is the cost of inaction, what is the opportunity cost, and what is actually the impact both up and down the funnel of this bottleneck at the moment. So this is somewhat of a mathematical process. It's something where we're looking at from a financial level or productivity level, and actually looking to conduct calculations and see what is the return of potentially solving this. And that then obviously guides things like relevancy, urgency and that ultimate return on potential investment. So we're going to show you a few examples as well, just to kind of put in a more real life perspective what we're talking about on a theoretical level. But to look at it visually, you can kind of see the path of any business, in this case, a startup. As you may be experimenting with an idea, you've validated things, you've started to build, and you're slowly becoming established. And many of our clients are established companies. That's when these inevitable bottlenecks start to become your constraints as you grow. And we're obviously looking to unlock the value between the desired and the current. That is the space where we're looking to work. Cool. The second reason that this is super important is once we've identified these bottlenecks, we're seeing a lot of people being held hostage in software development projects. Almost the majority of people we chat to have had at least one pretty awful experience with software developers. Often this looks like you've paid a huge upfront deposit and suddenly you're behind schedule, not getting honest feedback, and the software is just buggy and broken. It's a story, unfortunately, seemingly as old as time, at least in software and tech. And we're really going to try help you avoid that. And there's some common pitfalls that are quite easy to navigate if you know what to look for. And then lastly, that links very clearly to wasting immense amount of time and money. And that means many times guys are redoing the projects. We've had people come to us on multiple occasions when we are their second or third attempt to now finally get this right. And they've already wasted considerable budget or wasted that first impression. And you only have one impression with potential customers if it's a to-market product, or even to your internal users. When you're trying to make big change, you've only got one opportunity to really make a good first impression within the organization. Good stuff. Cool. So most people fail, unfortunately, when even trying to solve these bottlenecks and using software because they're unclear how to identify them. And then whether the bottleneck could actually be solved by custom software. If you're not actively working with tech, you might not know what's changed over the last 3 years with regards to automation. So that's a question we often get. What is actually possible? I see this problem, but I don't know, can you guys help me solve it? Is it that easy? Is it going to cost a few million rand to do? That's a very common question, and why people fail because they don't even get started. And then lastly, as I've said, the lack of understanding of what a healthy, successful software development process should look like. That's really where I think a lot of projects live or die. And by the end of this quick kind of session and time together, I hope that you'll be equipped with something that really helps you avoid pitfalls that we see many people fall into. And I think it's a big caveat to all of that. It's very understandable and perfectly reasonable to have these questions or to fall into these traps, because unfortunately, either you're not working in the space of tech and software, or it's actually just very hard to read the label from the inside of the bottle, as the saying goes. Being inside the company, there can be a simple value just from having an objective third party coming in from the outside and seeing things afresh. And that's also obviously what we try to do with our clients, and one of the larger values we often bring to the table. But cool, now to get to the actual core content. So how to identify these growth opportunities and existing bottlenecks. So what are growth opportunities and bottlenecks? We're not just talking untapped markets or general business scaling. We have the belief that every business system has a constraining factor. And once that constraining factor is lifted, growth will continue until the next constraining factor is hit. You'll likely have an intuition about what that is. It tends to be something when you view your business like a flowing process. What stands out is likely the highest value bottleneck. What is that one thing that if you could solve, would just really elevate everything else? Or what's the one thing that you may have tried to solve, but it's a bit too tough to figure out? Chris, I see your hand is up. Is everything audio-wise okay?
Everything good, Robbie, thanks. I just want to check in with the audience. Is this making sense? Is this resonating with you? And again, just if you have any questions during the webinar, please pop them in the Q&A section.
Perfect, cool. So what is the one thing that if you could solve, it really would make the difference? And it's typically a bit of a clue. It's the things that at the end of the month or during the course of business, your team are trying to avoid and don't look forward to. So maybe you have a uniquely complex payroll problem. And at the end of the month, you guys are really stressed. It's a lot of your time and resources. And it's something that really, if you guys could just somehow solve, would make your business a lot easier. and free up people to work on far higher value activities. And that's what I mean when I'm saying you're not just solving the constraint by freeing up resources and changing business flows, you're moving those resources elsewhere and they have upside as well. So it is that kind of link on effect that we're also looking to understand. But lastly, if we're looking for repetitive manual tasks, things like busy work, paper-based work that really should be digital, error-prone work, things that are causing excessive defect rates, poor customer service, these are the things that often hidden beneath the surface really actually are a constraint that once solved unlock far greater growth opportunities that at the surface may appear. Cool. A quick case study for us that we're fairly proud of. This was our first real experience as SwiftCom, at least with our fractional CTO offering, which was led by Chris with this one, and our first real opportunity to be a long-term development partner. And this was all the way back in 2013. So we partnered with a company in the furniture industry, which is still around today, but for confidentiality, we won't mention names. And back in the day, they were doing about 250,000 per month in terms of e-commerce revenue. By the time we kind of ended that quite long relationship of having built everything we felt we could have done, that was pushed up to 17, 18 million per month in revenue. So through that, you can clearly see a business changes a lot in terms of processes, bottlenecks, constraints through that timeline. And it gave us the opportunity on the ground to actually work through bottlenecks, work through constraints, and find these often huge unseen opportunities for growth. And that mainly looked like a variety of dashboards, automating multiple processes, and just managing general e-commerce growth. So for example, at one point in the business, there were 3 full-time people who were capturing orders. That was their only job. All 3 people, so 3 times salaries, were freed up completely by a single piece of software, and they're able to then be allocated elsewhere. And once again, put those human resources to more use, unlocking further growth and value. And that's one of the smaller examples, but just to break it down in a very simplistic way, these are the types of things we're talking about. Cool. Some more examples across the board. An insurance company, and I just want to maybe preface this with, there's so many businesses, and I'm just trying to give you a taste of the diversity that we're talking about here. I'm hoping already you have somewhat of an idea in your business what this could look like, or at least a sense of where the pain is. But an insurance company, for them, they were actually looking for a competitive advantage to maximize their profitability. If you know about insurance, one of the biggest ways to increase margin is to reduce the cost of the reinsurance. So in essence, the product that they're purchasing. They previously had a lot of data points, but didn't know how to put this together. I think it was about 30,000 odd data points. We're able to put that into a heat map, visualize data points, calculate risks, and allow them to be in a far stronger negotiating position. So quite an untraditional constraint that actually had a huge impact on their margin and profitability. A food delivery startup struggling to manage and track hundreds of drivers. In this case, a simple solution there is actually to perhaps be somewhat of a dashboard integrated with communication like WhatsApp that allows for real-time visibility, performance, readjusting of strategy, those types of things. A solar company, this is an interesting one in the sense that they were actually burdened with so much work. If you're in South Africa, you'll know why. And these installers just kind of couldn't keep up with the capacity because their constraint was skilled people to do installations. A big thing we noticed is that a significant portion of those installations' time were going into actually assessing and quoting. And by building software that in essence eased that process and replicated those efforts, we were able to not only reduce that process, increase the number of quotations, but free up the time of installations. And that's the type of thing where really we just lead into almost unforeseen growth opportunities by how things link to the next. And then a hotel group needed to optimize usage and water monitor levels. And that for us was a hardware and software integration. So as you can see, it's quite broad and it's very individualized. Yeah. So assessing the value of these things is obviously quite important. It's all good and well for us to say they're important and think we've got a good idea of what they may be, but we need to understand that we can't be viewing in isolation. We need to view things of what is upstream in the bottleneck, but we do actually need to now assess the value in financial terms before we make a decision. And leading back to maybe the very first slide of these $1 million opportunities, one of my favorite examples on this front is a building company. And in their case, they are really struggling with inaccurate invoicing. Basically, what is being done on site is not being accurately collected because it was a paper-based system, and that then led to discrepancies between the QS or the quantity surveyor authorizing payments, and therefore cash flow issues emerge. So once again, it's this business flow which has inherent complexity. By building a field services app that increases the correctness of the billing and streamlining that documentation into a QS flow that can work with and approve, you're not only solving quality assurance issues, you're solving massive cash flow issues, and then freeing up the resources of the people who previously had to try fix those things at month end to go and unlock more opportunities. And in this case, we're talking hundreds of millions of rands worth of contracts that are freed up and are being able to be exercised because of this simple kind of relook of how can software streamline this process. And that for us is something that, yeah, really excites us. I hope that's apparent. But cool. The last thing on bottlenecks, because I can talk at length about this stuff, is, once you've identified it, the obvious thing you do need to assess, is this a constraint that software can actually influence? If it's perhaps lead gen or a literal physical machine in a factory, that might not be the case. But if it is software, then look for off-the-shelf solutions. And if off-the-shelf solutions exist, is it 60% of what you require, 80, 90%? Is it 80% with a bit of kind of customization and a custom integration? And that works, then perfect. And that very likely will be your best cost-effective goal. It's a highly individualized decision. And if your problem is quite unique, you really need to have an understanding on that. However, where you can make an argument for custom software is obviously if something doesn't already exist, or if you wish to own the tech from an asset perspective, you wish to develop it into a competitive advantage. There are data, legal, regulatory considerations, implications you need to be aware of. And these are the types of things which then lead to, do I need something custom that I can own and understand? And that's obviously where the majority of our clients, that's where we have further conversation. Cool. Given you a run through of bottlenecks, the value of them, why they're important, hopefully some form of examples that can jog your brain. And then we're going to dive into just at a high level what building custom software should actually look like to help you avoid wasting lots of time and money. Once again, a reminder, if there are any questions, please feel free to chuck them in the Q&A. No question is too silly or simple, and we are here to help. So please feel free to jump into that, and we'll have contact information at the end as well. Cool. But what should building custom software actually look like? The foundation is pretty much coming down to three things, which is, are you scoping your requirements, defining them correctly, which, as I said, should be a joint effort? Should your software development process be working correctly? Have you got a good process? And I'd say most projects live or die here. And then lastly, as I said, is your technology stack selection correct? So your foundation needs to be defined correctly. To state the obvious, you need to have a firm understanding of the problem and the correct idea of what the solution should be. So upfront, as a non-technical person, you should never be asked for an in-depth specifications document. It is not your job to solve the problem. It is either your third-party developer or your internal team to solve in partnership with you. So this idea of coming to the table with a fully fleshed out idea of what the problem is, or what the solution is rather, that's kind of a recipe for disaster. 9 out of 10 times I would caution you, there is hidden complexity in software. It's somewhat inherent in this world. And you need a predefined process that is actually going to assess technical complexity, assess and challenge the problem solution fit, look at alternatives. And that's something that you need someone who's going to run you through that process. And you shouldn't just leave that up to chance, because to state the obvious, it's the foundation, it's the starting point. And if you get that wrong, you're not probably going to have your desired end result. And this all comes down to what we view as the expert versus the order taker. An expert is someone who will work with the problem, diagnose before they prescribe, where an order taker will simply take the prescription from you, the client, and say, sure thing, we can fulfill this. This is how much it's going to cost. This is how long it's going to take. And if you're engaging with parties in the latter, I would caution you, even an internal team, because sooner or later you're going to head down that process and realize you haven't accounted for things and haven't set up a relationship that is required to actually build these types of often complex solutions, solving complex problems. So think about it like as a doctor versus a pharmacist. No disrespect to any pharmacist that may be listening, but you're looking for someone who's going to diagnose and is going to actually work with you, understand, and then prescribe, not just take the prescription and kick out software you think is the right thing. Because unfortunately, that's very rarely the case. Leading on to the process. So we've effectively worked with an expert as opposed to an order taker. We've gone through a defined process to assess complexity, to understand the problem solution fit is validated, looking good. We now need a process to actually build it. Let's begin with what makes a bad process. It's typically three things. It's a lack of validation of either the idea, the problem, the solution, how users are actually viewing it. It's a lack of communication, so feedback in the process, progress that's being made, links to validation, once again, what bottlenecks and challenges are being hit, just honest, transparent communication. And then lastly, to state the obvious, quality output. If things are buggy and not working, the process is probably not working and your project is looking like probably closer in the failure pile. So if you're ever just unsure of progress in a project, you don't feel like you know what's going on, you're receiving quite consistently buggy software and are being asked to approve maybe large batches of work at quite a late stage after a lot of work's been done, or just generally feel like things are going off the rails, it's the process. The process is the problem, and the process should inherently be fixing everything else that could go wrong. What is a good process? Agile, Scrum, Waterfall. I think these are terms that are thrown around a lot, could even say used and abused within our own industry. But in short, and I'm sure a lot of people would have heard them already, Agile is an approach. It's a mindset, and Scrum in this case is a project management framework that falls under that mindset. And on the flip side, we've got slightly old school, traditional Waterfall. And you can simply think about it as a iterative approach versus a sequential approach. And I'll show you what I mean by that now. But within our context of solving complex problems with software and technology, that I would think aligns with any startup as well, any new business. When there are a lot of unknowns and unknown unknowns, you need something that accounts for this complexity. And in that case, Agile for us has been the clear winner, and is what we're going to try and really encourage you to look at seriously and look to stick at through the rest of just this next 2-3 minutes as I cover this. So simply meaning we're talking these iterative, small feedback cycles, as opposed to these long, large kind of sequenced steps, which don't give us kind of the flexibility and the communication, the feedback cycles we think we need to solve these types of problems. Practically, we work with most of our clients in 2-week sprints. So 10 business days. We have daily 15-minute stand-ups with a multidisciplinary team. So there's super high communication, extremely high visibility. Daily progress is being made that's clear to see. And that's just fundamentally different to Waterfall. But I hope you could see that it's that type of structure that is maybe more likely to lead to success. To give you a visual example, here's Waterfall. It may look impressive, it's perfectly segmented, but it's linear, sequential, rigid, and time-linked. It's just very hard to predict. And in our experience, it's unrealistic. And I've never quite seen, in our environment at least, a waterfall project actually go to plan. And you end up spending a significant portion of time restructuring to try and make things work, because as soon as new things pop up, you now need to redo this whole system, and you haven't accounted for it. As opposed to the simple comparison of Waterfall versus Scrum, you can see instead of that sequential steps, you've got these silos of these quick feedback cycles that are consistently realigning you for the optimal solution as you get to your end goal. And that is what we'd encourage you to look at with a lot more kind of detail and pursue, because I think it's best for, in our context, I'd argue 98, 99% of people. A smaller breakdown of the process. I don't want to waste too much time going into it, but once again, you can see that cycle. It's that feedback cycle of running through what are we doing in the sprint? We're going to work through it within the 2-week within the 2-week, or in this case, 1 to 4 week sprint. We're then going to review what's been done. We'll be delivering value guaranteed at the end of the 2-week. And we'll then have a retrospective, which assesses what did we do? What can we improve? What didn't work too well? And once again, how can we look to make this process better? Whereas in Waterfall, you're kind of lacking a significant part of that, if not all of it. Cool. And this is a board. So this is what, just as a practical example, if you're in a 2-week sprint, for argument's sake, this is what you would see. You will see tickets move from to do, in progress, review, and done. Different projects might have different columns that go into more detail. And another thing to note with Scrum is the definition of done is something that is decided as a team, but instead of just being aesthetically finished from a code perspective or design perspective, it will often include a level of testing, security. There's a rigor behind something actually making it to the done column that you can view as kind of quality assurance. Cool. And lastly, out of the 3, the technology stack selection. So like building a house, building anything, choosing your building materials very purposely is something that understandably would make sense to be important. But we've seen many times people don't give their tech stack selection enough thought. Many technologies allow you to start really quickly, but within that first year, 2 years, you hit terminal velocity and you realize you're now tied into this thing that probably wasn't the best building materials to begin with. So there are always lots of factors to assess. The common ones that are thrown around are technical debt, which is somewhat, how do you have an accumulation of these quick fixes that you do, but without really addressing these core issues. How does that lead to this kind of debt that needs to be solved over time or is growing over time? Integrations, do you have difficulty merging with different systems components? But of course, things like code-based handover. How easy is it to give to other developers? Licensing costs of certain kind of low-code systems, for example, data protection, intellectual property. The list goes on and on. But often this decision surprises us with how little weight it gets given. And development partners often can just kind of see which resources they have available with what talent and skill sets and be like, cool, we will then build in this because this is the team we have available. And that is really probably not the wisest approach. And yeah, it should also be factored in. Are you building this minimum viable product, an MVP that you're just looking to scrap? Or is this something that you're really looking to build and needs to have a level of long-term system infrastructure? Are your systems kind of simply just being guided by the majority of what you've seen other people do? Are they kind of first principled decisions of what's best for you? And the last thing I'll say on the tech stack, it's a particular passion point of mine, is often the smartest people want to work in tech. So if you're choosing a tech stack that's quite backdated per se, within 5 to 10 years, it's really going to be backdated. So not only you're maybe choosing something that's setting yourself up for a slower, older system in the future, but you're also losing out on a recruiting angle that could be really valuable because the best people want to work with the best stuff and the new stuff. So regardless, your team, be it an internal party or an internal development partner, should be able to defend their decision, and they should be able to give the other options they've considered and weighed up for you. So at a minimum, if you're non-technical, I get it, it's hard, and it's a very opinionated space. We affirm in our opinion, so can other people be. But at minimum, they should be able to show consideration, show they've looked at other options, and explain why they've made the decision that they have. So that would be my suggestion to you of kind of what you should expect and what you should hold accountable. Cool. As we wrap up towards the end, this is what we're saying is a red flag checklist, and we're trying to make it quite easy for you to protect yourself from failure and getting hurt in this kind of process. And it's 6 easy things. So the first is, do they communicate daily? If you're working with someone, sorry, Chris, I see your hands up.
Robbie, yeah, we just have a question that came in regarding intellectual property of the code base from Emily. So
Sure.
I'll just go ahead and quickly answer that. Okay. If you're using open source software, then the intellectual property is licensed under MIT. So, it depends on what you're using in the code base, but our rule of thumb is you have IP as a company and we have IP as a company that existed before the relationship. we're now getting together to build something which you're paying us for, and therefore whatever we're building is your IP. But just keeping that separation between what we had beforehand and what you had beforehand. So I hope that makes sense. I thought, let me just take that one live. Robbie, over to you. Emily, I hope that makes sense.
Perfect. And definitely makes sense to take it at the time. So all good. Thank you. I'm not watching the Q&A, but thanks, Chris. Cool. That quick and easy red flag checklist. Do they communicate daily? So either if you're looking at a potential partner, their process should show you that they will do that. Or if you're looking and assessing an existing partnership, are you getting daily communication? Are they releasing frequently? I would really say that in many cases, every 1 to 3 days, you should be seeing some form of meaningful output, albeit code or design. Do you have more than 4 to 5 very small bugs? If you do, things are probably starting to go quite wrong. Do they have multiple people working on different projects? That's very common for many agencies. Their teams will be split, and their focus is not focused on your problem. And that's obviously what should be optimal. And then the last two is, do you need to pay this huge upfront deposit, 50, 60, 80 times? We've heard 100% expectations that lock you in, that kind of being held hostage thing we touched on early on. And then lastly, the expert versus the order taker. Is there process? Is there communication? Is there a way of working? The doctor that is there to help you diagnose, go through your treatment journey with you? Or are they just an order taker that's somewhat expecting you to prescribe what you want and they'll just fill it out best they can? In many of these contexts of what we're discussing, that is not sufficient, and you're just going to end up wasting a lot of time and money on that. And if it really is quite a simple solution, then at least work with the doctor that will prescribe that accurately and ensure that they've done the diagnosis to assess that with a high level of probability. Cool. So the last thing I want to kind of end off with before we go into any further Q&A, if there is any, is the common route. And unfortunately, the all too common software development tale of you've identified this bottleneck and you're doing the traditional common route. You found a great looking company, signed an NDA, whatever it may be, and you've given them a spec sheet. This is the problem we need solved. This is the solution. They ask for a 50% deposit, if not more, and they begin work. Management approves the quote, you're happy. 6 weeks in, you kind of check in, how's it going? And the developers are, yeah, all pretty good. We're happy. We'll probably have a demo in 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, still no demo. So you touch base again. And that's when it's unearthed that, oh, okay, there's technical complexity that we didn't foresee and we're figuring it out. And very quickly, those 2 weeks turn into 4 weeks, into 6 weeks, because they're now readjusting this process that they really didn't accommodate these kind of unforeseen things. And you end up with either no working software, very delayed software, or very buggy software because the process hasn't adjusted for it. On the flip side, what you should actually be getting, at least in our mind and from our experiences, once you've identified the bottleneck, you're going to the person that you trust, you're workshopping things together, you're diagnosing this together, you're getting someone from outside the bottle to help you read the label. You shouldn't be paying these huge upfront deposits. In our mind and our operation, you're paying per a sprint. There should be a constant model of value being delivered in these 2 week increments. So as I said, in these 1 to 3 day processes, you should at least be seeing the deliverables build up into this bigger value of increment that's being delivered. Daily stand-ups, 15 minutes. There should just be a high level of transparency at all times. And you should be in a place where you trust the person so much that you don't need it, but it's to the success of the project that visibility is there and that accountability is there. And just keeping on track and making sure when roadblocks do come up, the communication is quick. So when that technical complexity is seen, you're giving yourself the time and the process to actually, as a multidisciplinary team that's focused on the problem, look for alternatives. If we don't need to solve this in this way, maybe there's alternatives. And unfortunately, technical complexity exists. So it's how you navigate it the best that makes all the difference. But cool. We've run through how to spot these things at a level. We've run through kind of some of the things of what we're talking about, bottlenecks, constraints, what it looks like, and how to unlock the value of doing so, and hopefully not losing time and money and being trapped in a bad software development process. So if you're confident that you've got some growth opportunities that you're yet to unlock, or you're just feeling that pain and not looking forward to part of your business because you know it just gives you stress, then we would love to chat with you. To state the obvious, that's obviously a reason why we're doing this. We to kind of talk to business owners about these things and see if there's a potential fit and we can help you. We're doing bottleneck discovery calls. We typically do about 10 of these a month, and we slot time for that purpose because we like to go pretty in depth and actually give it time. It is zero obligation, as I'll touch on now, but together, if you're keen, we'll basically discuss what your bottleneck is costing you and evaluate that. We'll assess whether custom software is a good option, or if it doesn't look like it, we're happy to suggest the easiest, cheapest alternative we think might just solve the problem for you. But lastly, if it does look like custom software might be a viable fit, we will then give you a personalized roadmap of what we would suggest actually looks like a viable fix. It is a first come, first serve. As I say, we kind of structure the time. There's a QR code so that links to a Calendly. So if you are interested, feel free to take a picture of the screen. Chris, if you can maybe put our emails, both you and myself, in the chat, if anyone would prefer that. Always open to messages on LinkedIn and just to chat. So if you'd like to book a slot of one of those 10 discovery calls, the QR code, or you can scan, or you can type in the link. Feel free to take a picture of the screen. I will come back to that now. But we've done this process in, I'm glad to say, a large number of industries and solved a large number of problems, albeit insurance, education, fintech, mining, sports, entertainment, manufacturing, hospitality, the list goes on. It's what we nerd out about. I hope that is somewhat apparent that we really enjoy talking about this stuff and working through it. And we would love to chat to you. So if you think that there's something in your business you'd like to solve and you would, at minimum, just like a second opinion and people who've been exposed to this quite a bit to give you a sense, you're welcome to kind of take one of those slots. It's your obligation. It's free. It's the only cost is your time, and we will definitely intend to make it as worth your time as we possibly can. Cool. I think that's it. I hope that was somewhat helpful. I hope there was at least one or two things that at minimum help you avoid a potentially problematic software development relationship one day. Chris, are there any questions that you'd like to? I see there are a few questions. Are there any you'd like to touch on now? Anything that I've missed and you'd really like to mention? Otherwise, I look forward to chatting to you, you guys, either on Discovery Bottleneck calls or via LinkedIn and email. Always up for a Zoom and a conversation, which is good. But yeah, Chris, over to you.
Thanks, Robbie. Yeah, I've put the emails in the chat for anybody that might prefer that. I think just to kind of just rapidly from my side iterate that, we see an alternative growth path as opposed to just new leads for a business. And we see, finding those bottlenecks in the thing or in the company that's obstructing the flow, of water coming this side and going out that side, to kind of remove those and to identify those as quickly as possible and to also value them. And then, as Robbie said, to suggest a solution. So that sounds like something that's valuable to you, and we'd love to chat. So yeah, no additional questions that I'm seeing. I've answered some in the chat. So yeah, that's everything from our side.
Cool. Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for attending. I look forward to chatting to quite a few of you. I appreciate so many of you attending as well and being keen to listen to our thoughts and thinking on these things. Yeah, I'm looking forward to chatting. So I'm going to leave this on the screen for I think another 2 minutes or so. You're welcome to take a picture, scan the code, or obviously type in the URL. But that's it from us today. And thank you so much for attending. And I hope you have a really great week further.